Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. India is in a jump. Let's be very clear. It's facing enemies on two fronts, and the third front is attacks not on the border but inside the country. The killing of the innocent people, a school principal, a chemist and a pharmacist, and so on recently, and all belonging to the minority community in Kashmir, raises certain pertinent questions. Why this endemic killing? Why are the people being asked who they are, and based on their name, they are shot dead? India's security environment, as I said, is a really precarious one, and people may not talk about it. But the reality remains that this precarious, dangerous security environment on the borders and inside the country is insidious and makes political future fragile. Not only that, it deadens the human sensibilities and kills the spirit of nationalism, breeds communalism, and it requires a great act of statesmanship, and that statesmanship has to be visible to face these challenges. As I said earlier, India faces combo of dangers on the front. The surgical strike that was there may not be possible today, but then what's the alternative? The targeted terror attacks, and I call them terror attacks, against minorities in Kashmir have taken a very dangerous turn. It may not be absolutely unanticipated. The intelligence reports were that there is a danger of the minorities being made victims. But it's very important to understand that these targeted killings of Hindus and Sikhs are in fact a part of the larger program. The Hindus and Sikhs were identified and shot, not for any other reason but for what they are. And the weight of the horrendous cumulative violence in Kashmir, the presence of some Muslim casualties at the hands of security forces, cannot be an excuse for soft peddling this fact. The purpose of this killing is pure terror, and it is to drive out the minorities from Kashmir, to change the demographics of Kashmir, and also deter minorities from coming back. Not only that, it exploits the communal features developing throughout India. And in fact, a message is being sent. And the message is very clear. You kill a Muslim, will kill 10 Hindus and Sikhs. Simple. Though the killing in the other parts of the country, of the Muslims, may even be a law and order situation. These attacks on the minorities are a reminder, and very clear reminder, that very few counterinsurgency strategies have succeeded in comprehensive control. What you require is a comprehensive political settlement that involves all parties. But then, can you have those parties who do not adhere to the national cause? That's $1 million question, and nobody can deny that. It's a fact that India is suffering and is bleeding basically. Now, for small groups of terrorists who are operating in Kashmir, it's very easy to give a lie to premature and often much wanted claims about normality in Kashmir. Kashmir is not normal, and all saying that it's normal is belying the truth. It's okay to give hope to the people, but at the same time, you have got to be prepared to face the reality. There is a certain analogy being drawn with the 90s when Kashmir Pandits were targeted and driven out. And then what happened? Jagmohan doctrine came into being. And there is another aspect to this analogy which is forgotten. Despite the intelligence inputs, it's once again proving difficult for the state of Kashmir to provide protection to the minorities. Let's be clear. Whether it was a state or whether it's a union territory, the fact remains that the administration has failed miserably to provide protection to the minorities. Today, as it was in the 90s, easier to be politically use the plight of minorities in Kashmir. They are being used as a tool rather than as human beings. They are not being provided the security that they need. The BJP government today has its Jagmohan movement. That's the first implication. The second one, the purpose of these attacks is to draw a response from the state and create a strategy. And the strategy is very clear. Heads we win, tails you lose. So if you start being oppressive, the people all over the world will rise and say human rights are being violated, it's state terrorism. And the propaganda by Pakistan and China would camouflage the reality that this is in fact a protection to the minorities. There can be two responses. The first is deepening and widening of the combing of the terrorists within Kashmir. But given the state's record, these measures are always, and they have to be oppressive. So the government should shed its cloak of respectability and say, okay, we are oppressive, not because the terrorists have to be killed, but so that the minorities have to be defended. And then there is a fear that it might be a permanent state of emergency. So what? Now, these responses increase political alienation, but then this is the assessment of the Home Ministry. That's wrong. The political alienation is of those people who are already alienated. And what if it doesn't make? They are terrorists, all right. They are criminals. Now, the second response is external. If the Indian state, there is no doubt that this is the work of the groups supported by Pakistan. If that is the case, we have been reminded once again that the airstrikes which are within our rights are not a solution to the problem of terrorism. India's possible escalation against Pakistan is now hampered by a fact that it's militarily under greater pressure from China on the Eastern Front. So India has, as I said earlier, a combo of options. The performance that was seen in the bravado of surgical strikes notwithstanding, our security dilemma is much worse than it was a few years back. The BJP government want to break the shackles of the past, but its hands are more tied. So that gives rise to the third implication. These attacks very clearly play into the politics of communalism in India. The plights of Hindus and now of Sikhs in Kashmir has always been communally weaponized. And theoretically, you can distinguish between the terrorists and the other members of the communities. But a responsible political leadership should make that distinction. But when you have communally surcharged public discourse, then the political patronage at the highest level that is being given to the terrorists, let's not forget it. At the highest level, not the government, But in the opposition, I am yet to see the criticism of these acts by Omar Abdullah, by Farooq Abdullah, by Mehbooba. They are in fact accessories to this. Slowly and surely, these attacks will play into the deep communal divide in the rest of India. And that's the purpose, to divide the Indian public on communal lines. That's their purpose. Fourthly, the abiding tragedy of the Indian Republic is that we do not have a common language of solidarity or a political language that can express a united front against violence of all kinds. Our response to violence is politically motivated and is based on the political lines. Look at what happened in Hatra. The girl is raped. Bad enough. But the response is immediately on the political lines, pro-government and anti-government, where it should be legal and illegal. What happened in Lakhimpur Kheri? The same thing. Pro-government, anti-government. Pro-BJP, anti-BJP. It should have been the killing of the people, period. Same is happening now. It gives a tool to the opposition to say, well, the government has failed, even bringing the state under as a union territory has not helped. So, since the lack of this knowledge, this common language, is a precursor to the divide, these killings have been condemned by all opposition parties. But a formal condemnation is easy. The social media has taken out the gravity of the delicate of the sentiment. It's clearly hypocritical criticism because always said government has failed to do this. They should have said government needs to be more strict, more affirmative. When you criticize the government for the action of the terrorists, you are weakening the resolve of the government and of the security agencies, and that's not done. The kind of the political gestures that display a commitment to the idea that our mourning for the victims will not be selective, we cannot do justice. Look at Lakhimpur Kheri again. They were all hue and cry by the opposition for the 4 farmers that were killed, absolutely. But what about those BJP workers? What about that driver? And what about the journalist? Why should the cry not have been for all the 8 people rather than only for the 4 people? The political parties failed there as they are failing here. Now we are crying for Sukhvinder Kaur, the principal. We are crying for the chemist, the druggist. But why are we not crying for the Muslims? It should be that the minorities and the people belonging not to the minority has suffered. In a state like Kashmir, the lack or the absence of the political language to overcome the divide is suicidal. And the opposition is not understanding this reality. The fifth, this simple fact that Kashmir still does not have avenues of normal political articulation. Even the union territories are not functioning the way they should function. Still, it's a superimposed administration. So what we need is that the process of the democratic governance should be there. Then the blame would not shift to the central government, it would remain concentrated over there. The older political dissensions has been legitimized, that's undoubtedly very clear. But there is no new political class that has emerged. And the emergence of that class is a must. Kashmir was never allowed the normal process, let's be clear. Whether it was the dismissal of Sheikh Abdullah, first the planting of Sheikh Abdullah, then the dismissal of Sheikh Abdullah, dismissal of Mir Qasim, dismissal of Sadiq, all that was manipulated by the center, which should not have been there. But as I said earlier, the normal process of social mediation in a democracy is elected legislature and the elected government. That process has never been there. All the elections, even when they were not manipulated, but the fear that the chief minister can be sacked at the whim of the prime minister created a situation that they were pawns in the hands of the federal government. And to be honest, Indian government has never been very honest as far as Kashmir is concerned. Political violence in India has always been intimately tied to demographic imagination. And then the engineering of the rights, Muzaffarabad for Muslims, Delhi for Sikhs, leads to a contrived fear of democratic domination. The narrative of majoritarianism and public outcry of minorities who cry Pakwi at the least at the drop of a hat. And not only Kashmir, other states have to varying degree experienced violence over demography. The fear of altering demography after the abrogation of Article 370 was not real, but even the national opposition, like Congress, played upon this for the desire to reap possible benefits which they never reaped. Now, these killings of the minorities are probably politically overdetermined, and it might not be fruitful to speculate on the proximate causes. Have they been provoked by the bravado of the politicians? And the fear that the properties sold or transferred to the pundits might be recovered, and most of the properties have not gone to the terrorists. No, let's be clear. They have gone to the part and the proteges of the political leaders. So their fear was that those properties might be recovered. So let the pundits go back. And if you select pundits, that might be bad. So let all the minorities be put under fear and let them go back. It is basically greed. Is it not a mundane effect of deterring investment, especially of land and property, that is indirectly making the political leadership quiet and encouraging terrorists to take over? Are these attacks aimed at preemptive, making sure that even the small minority groups left in Kashmir today leave Kashmir? Now, given the historical status of Kashmir and in line with the other hill states, northeast, the question of democratic composition is a very important one, and it has to be tackled like that. Now, there is a difference between engineered change and organic one that arises out of historical and economic needs of the community. But it's hard to think of any politics centered on demography that does not shade into violence and even prejudice. There are good historical and ecological reasons to worry. And the worry is that demographic balance in Kashmir was disturbed when the pundits were thrown out. And someone seeing a retailer from Bihar or a school teacher from Jammu as a sign of oppression cannot be accepted to be a real fact. As a matter of fact, experience everywhere suggests, and I'm not talking of Kashmir, but it can happen in any part of the world, that the process of political demography, despite best intentions, ends up in a reactionary place, and India is heading towards that trap. As a matter of fact, the demographic change is evident in the New Deal limitations that are likely to come up shortly. India's security environment is precarious. Its political future is fragile, as I said. But what is be happening? Would the reaction be more communal? And pre-electoral build-up and sporting infrastructure along LAC shows very clearly that the Chinese are not going to go away. Even the 13th talk which started recently is very clear. And it means that Indian army not only has to continue mirroring the Chinese troop, but remain forward deployed. And the second consecutive winter, when the temperatures would be minus 30 degrees, when our army would be there. Simultaneously, in Kashmir, Indian army is entering a new phase. If we go by the intelligence sources, the string of targeted killing has been carried out by hybrid terrorists. And those groups are not even on the radar of the security forces. Taliban back in charge in Afghanistan. A new generation of Kashmiri youth is being inspired to take up militancy. And Indian government failed to foresee that this would happen. There's already chatter about anti-India terror groups in Pakistan shifting their assets to Afghanistan. Now, combined Pakistan-China Nexus poses a significant strategic security challenge. That's on the border. Now, the terrorist attacks inside makes it a two-front war in the front and another front war to the back. So the Indian forces would be fighting front and back simultaneously. As a matter of fact, what India is facing is not an all-out conflict, but a grey zone Chinese and Pak territory that will take incremental losses to India and incremental cost and a long period of time. And India's economy would suffer in that's a byproduct, that's suffering. And this has become the normal state of play. Pakistan antipathy, Chinese revisionism. They are not going back. Let's be very clear. Whatever Pakistan might say, whatever China may say, the enmity of Pakistan is going to stay. The Chinese are going to be there. So the government has to adopt an all-of-government approach to meet these challenges. You cannot be selective. So the plans to reorganize the military into a joint theatre, they have to be accelerated. And I'm happy that the government is doing it. The order for the 176 fighter jets, amphibian, nuclear, submarine offered by Russia. But inside, we have to be proactive on all fronts. Telling terrorists it's not acceptable. And if we have got to be harsh, let us be harsh. It's not the time for mollycoddling. It's not the time to be pussyfooted. Let's not forget that boosting the economy becomes a national security imperative if we have to match these three threats, to one inside the country, to outside the country. And at the same time, the social polarization has to be curbed, otherwise the enemy will take a benefit of this. India must steel itself, and I say must, if it wants to fight the strategic battle that lies ahead. Would India be able to do it? Is a $1 billion question that faces. But the most important is the nationalist parties, irrespective of their party affiliations, should wake up that the need of the nation, the strength of the nation, that the unity of the nation is much more imperative than who sits in Salmon Racecourse Road. Until the occupant of that Salmon Racecourse Road is a mental retard, as some national political leaders are. Let's unite for the need of the nation. Otherwise, India's hope of being a Vishwaguri would be a pipe dream. Thank you.